Coming up on the Amazing Art Show, 4-part prints. Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Amazing Art Show. I'm your host, Angie Beam, and we've got a great project today. We are going to be doing a 4-part print, and I'll explain a little more about the 4-part later. So let me kind of explain first some of the things that you're going to need. You're gonna need a couple weird things today. First thing that I want you to grab is you just need a thick kind of a paper, so you could do cardboard would be fine. Just something, you know, like cardboard paper, or even just cardboard, like a cardboard box you could cut up would be fine. And I just did mine in, I don't know, it's probably like a 6x6 square. So you need something like that. And you are going to need a piece of styrofoam. Now, you can pick this up in the cafeteria at school, and if you're really, really nice, they just might give you one that's clean. But if not, you can clean off yours and take it with you, and you can use it and cut it up. If you don't have access to that, you know, at the store they sell like styrofoam plates, and you can get a plate, and you'll have to do it a little bit differently than how we're doing it, but you can still achieve the same effect. So you need a little piece of styrofoam, and then you're going to need some kind of a printing ink, and then you'll need a brayer, which is how we're going to be applying the ink to your plates. And you're also going to need something that you can use to put your ink on. So this is an inking tray. This is what the professionals use. You don't have to have that. You could just use a paper plate or a piece of whatever this stuff is. This like clear plastic wrap you could use. Just put that down, tape it down to the table. You could use that. Would work fine. And you'll need a pencil, preferably one without an eraser, which sounds weird, but that's what you're going to need. And then some scissors and some glue. And then last but not least, some tissue paper. And my tissue paper, I've got some that has kind of been tie-dyed. And then I've also got just some plain pieces. So you might want to do, kind of a mixture, or it's up to you to decide. Colors and all that kind of good stuff. All right, so I think that is it. All of the weird things out of the way. So we're ready to get started. So we're doing printmaking today. So I want to first talk to you a little bit about what printmaking is. So think about the word print. And so when you are on the computer and you have something that you want to keep, you hit print, and it goes to the printer and it makes a print of it. So it's basically making a copy of whatever it was that you were looking at. Well, printmaking is just that, but there's a little more of an artistic twist to it, because you typically in printmaking are creating the surface that you're going to be printing on. And so there's lots of different kinds of printmaking. There's lino cuts, which are made out of like a linoleum, like a sheet of linoleum. It's really kind of soft and pliable. Some of them are a little harder, and you carve into them to create your design. There's also wood blocks, which are, it's a piece of wood, and you use carving tools to carve into it, to carve your design into it, which is what they used to use a long time ago when they would print the newspaper. Amazingly enough, they had all of these little wooden letters that were carved out, and they would place all the little letters in there, and then that's how they would print the newspaper. So if you can only imagine how long that would take to do every single letter to make an article, that's how they would do it. And so that's obviously been around for a long time. And they also would use wood cuts to put prints on fabrics. Before we had the technology that we have today, they would use that method to put, different kinds of patterns on fabrics. And then also, they also have what is called screen printing. And screen printing, you guys know way more about screen printing than you think you do, because screen printing has been around for a long time. And if you own a shirt, which I know you all do, that has some kind of a design on it that has been printed onto the t-shirt, that is screen printing. So, and I actually brought with me today, I brought a screen print. So I'm going to put this back here. It's really big. And this is what a screen print looks like. It has a wooden frame that goes around it. And then this that you see in here is like a meshy kind of a fabric. And they staple it in. I'll flip it around so you can see. They staple it in along the back. And then they create a stencil And a stencil is it's like made out of a plasticky kind of a substance, and then they cut the design into it. So the stencil that you see on here is kind of the green part, and then you see the eyes that are created here. And so they adhere the stencil to the frame, and the parts that are green are the parts that are the stencil, and then the parts that are this yellowy color, this is the meshy fabric that was on there originally. And so what happens is they will take the printing ink and they will put the printing ink up here, squirt it out up there, and then you know the squeegees that you use to clean the shower with? They have a big squeegee and they run the squeegee down, and as they run it down, the places where the stencil is, where this green stuff is, it can't go through because it won't allow it to go through. But these yellowy areas where there is no stencil, that's where the ink squeezes through, and so that's where your design comes from. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Fort Worth Cats, but this is one of their screen prints that would be for one of their t-shirt designs. So in the cat's eyes, you see the F and the W, and so the t-shirts were black, and then the eyes that you saw on the t-shirts were yellow, and that's all you would see are just the eyes. So that's kind of how screen print works, and they've been around for a long time, but Andy Warhol, which we've talked about before, he's kind of the artist that really got everybody talking about screen printing because he really made it popular. And then I've also brought really quick 2 other prints I was going to show you really fast. This is an example of a lino cut. It's got a little glare there. And this is Elizabeth Catlett. And so these pieces were carved out of that little piece of linoleum and printed onto her surface. And then another one, and this artist is very, very popular. This is MC Escher. And this one is actually a wood engraving, which I wasn't even aware that he had done wood engraving, so I was pretty excited when I found this. So typically I've just seen his, his pencil drawings, and so I thought that was pretty interesting to find that little treasure. So, all right, so let's talk about what you're going to be doing today. Let me get this off of me. Okay, so on your piece of styrofoam, the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to get it into a more manageable size. So I just want you to cut it in half. And depending on, if you're using a paper plate, you're going to kind of have to adjust that as you need to. And your pencil, without the pencil eraser, I specified specifically, because you're going to actually use that to help create your different surfaces, okay? Now, what makes a print is that you have the surface area and then you have the relief. So there will be certain areas that are going to be pressed down further than others, and then the original surface area is still going to stick up. So when you ink it, the ink's only going to stick on the areas that are, still sticking up. The original surface area is what you're going to basically print. So in saying that, that kind of goes along with what we're going to be starting on here. And what I want you to do is you're going to just divide your plate into, I would say 5 to 7 areas. And so you can make them as detailed as you would like or as simple as you would like. So I'm just going to, and you want to go in pretty deep, but not so deep that you go all the way through and create a hole. If you happen to be more strong than you think you are and you do create a hole, you can just put some tape on the back. It works out okay. And sometimes, I will warn you, you put your pencil in there and you get going on this fabulous line, and then it'll kind of pull your pencil in a direction you don't necessarily want it to go. So you have to be, kind of flexible when you're doing this. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 areas. I'm going to divide this one up here. And then my last one, I'm going to do kind of a zigzag pattern, and it's kind of pulling my pencil like I was talking about. So it's not my most perfect zigzag line, but it's as close as I'm probably going to get. Okay, so after I have this, my next job is going to be going in and adding patterns to each area. So I want you to think shapes and I want you to think lines. And I want you to continue to carve in pretty deep with your pencil. And then once I get this started, we're going to talk a little bit about the relief part. Okay, so I've got my first design is in here. I just did some oval shapes. All right, now to create your relief, you have the option at this point that you can either make your ovals stand up, and meaning that's what's going to print. You're going to have, this part will have the ink on it, so that your little black dots or your black ovals will print black ovals on your printing surface, okay? And then that means, if we're going to do it that way, that means that all of this stuff that's back here in the background, we have to push all of that down, okay? So I'm telling you that early so that when you're doing your designs and you're thinking it through, you don't want to have them all be relieved the same way. So you don't want to have them all where the shapes are all sticking up. You want to have some variety. So I'm telling you that because on the ones like this small one right here would be the perfect one where you press down all of the background space and you're not having to spend all that time pressing all of such a large space down. So kind of think about that. So that's one option. Your other option is that you can press down the shape, which means that all of this out here around the background part is going to print, which means that you're going to have all of this and then your shape will be a void. There won't be anything there. So when it prints, you're just going to have like these open oval shapes. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do on mine just because I've got such a big space. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to really quickly, I'm just going to push down going over it. Then I'm going to turn and I'm going to go a different direction. And that just kind of helps break down, you know, the particles in it, and it helps it to be able to flatten down better. Now, as I run my finger across this, I'm feeling that it is going down somewhat, but I've still got pieces that are sticking up. Those pieces that are sticking up will get ink on them and then they will print, and that's not what we want. So once you've kind of broken it down with your pencil, the next thing that I want you to do is you're going to go in with the end of your pencil that does not have an eraser on it. And that is when you can go in there and like really, really push down, like push, push, push as hard as you can. You can even use the very edge of the pencil to get right up next to the edge of your design. And so you're going to press down all the way around. You can go across using your pencil edge. And then I just want you to keep running your finger over it. Once you get to the part where you can run your finger over and you don't feel any of this touching your finger, you've accomplished gold, you're good, okay? So move on to your next shape, okay? Now, let's say, just to show you an example of the other way that I was talking about. All right, so now I've done a stripe pattern. And in each of my areas that I'm creating, I want to have some kind of relief, which means one part of it's going to stick up, one part's going to recess and be down, okay? So I'm going to do every other stripe. So I'm going to come in here. I want my stripes to stand up, every other one of them to stand up, I should say. And so now I'm going to go in, and that means on every other one, I've got to push it down. And sometimes you'll get little pieces that'll kind of peel off like that. It's okay. And like I said, if you don't know your own strength and all of a sudden you realize that you have gone through, it is okay. Just put a piece of tape on the back. Duct tape works great. It's not going to matter and it's not going to show. So I've now gone through, and you can even use your finger if you want. All right, so I'm going to go through. I'm feeling this. Feels pretty good. So I would do that here on this next one as well. And then when it prints, I'm going to have, it's going to print a stripe, a void, a stripe, a void, a stripe. Okay, so that'll kind of get your brain wrapped around that. Okay, now you're going to do 2 of these. Okay, so whatever you decide to do on your first one, you want to do something totally different on your second one, but you're going to do both. And on both, you're going to have areas that you've pushed down and areas that are going to be still standing up and going to be the original surface area. Okay, so you're going to do that on both. Once you get both of them finished, you're going to use your scissors, and you can use your ruler if you would like to, but you're basically going to cut them into little squares. And I think mine are 2.5 by 2.5. So right now, And these are actually some that I borrowed, but these are what and they're black because I've already printed. So yours won't be this dark at first. All right, so you can see how the designs are all in there. You can see how there are areas that are pushed down and areas that are standing up. Some of them are a little bit better than others. This one's got it really good and pressed down. Others are not so, and you'll see the difference when we print, how it kind of works. The more you press it down, the better your print turns out, okay? All right, so put those to the side because you won't need them for a little bit. And next, let's talk about this. We're going to create your mat, and this is what you're going to print on. Okay, so this is your surface that you're going to print on. And so basically what I want you to do is you're going to cut your tissue into strips, like 2 by 2-inch strips would work pretty good. You can do them a little bit thicker, a little bit thinner, it's up to you. And basically the one thing I'm going to tell you that will help you a lot is when you first go to glue on, I'll glue some back here so you can kind of see it. When you first go to glue on your first strips, you need like the smallest amount of glue that you possibly can do. So a couple ways. I like to make a little dab of glue, and then I just dip my finger in and go across, but for faster time here, I'm just going to kind of do my best that I can, and I just want barely up at the top. And if it gets globby at all, I want you to take your finger and just smooth it down, but you do not want it to get down here. You want it to be up, up as close to the top as you can get it. And then I'm going to take my strips, and you want to line up the end, and you're going to lay down each little strip. And once you get it stuck up there, I want you to pull it down here and make sure that you get it as straight as you can. Okay? Then you're going to go to your next one, and you're going to continue to do that until you get to the end. Now, let me give you a big word to the wise here. Because tissue paper is kind of difficult to cut, there's a slight possibility that as you cut it, it might move. So the strip might be 2 inches up at the top, and then as it gets down, it's a little bit less than that. So you may end up with these little gaps. It's okay, don't worry. But what I do want you to worry about is do not let them overlap. And what I mean by that is, like, if I take this purple one and I put it right next to this yellow one here and I let it overlap, when I go to weave back and forth going horizontally, I'm going to have a big old mess right there. So don't let them overlap. I would rather you have spaces in between and scoot it over a little bit more than to have it overlap, because it will be such a headache for you. Okay? So remember, once you get it on there, I want you to kind of pull it tight, and I want you to straighten it as much as you can straighten it. Okay? So you're going to do that all the way across. I'm going to take mine off because I've already done that on the front. Now, once you get them all going vertically, the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to start to weave going horizontally. Okay? So I want you to remember a couple things when you're weaving. We've talked about this before, but you always look to the strip that you did before, and that tells you the answer on what you're supposed to do next. So you look at your work before, that tells you what to do next. So I can look on here and see that on this last strip, I started by going over. So that means I have to do the opposite, which means I'm going to start this time by going under. And I'm just going to over, under. And it works pretty good because you can just kind of lift these up and move it up where you need it to be. And then I want you to kind of shimmy it up there to the top. And try to get it as straight as you can. And then I really wanted to use some of these blue ones. I've been eyeballing this blue. All right, so I'm going to look to see what I did last. The last one I did is I went under, so now I'm going to go over the first one. And I'm going to weave this and get this in. Now, I would recommend that you do about 2 strips, and then what I want you to do is you're going to lift it up. You're going to get that barely any glue again. Just do the edge right here. You're going to glue this down to the edge, and then even though this is going to be glued down, you're still going to have this little flappy edge right here. So guess what? You got to put a little glue right here, and you got to glue that down. I want you to watch for this happening. See how this is kind of kinked up right here? Make sure when you put the glue down and before you actually lay it down into the glue, make sure that you pull it tight. So you want it to be tight, all right? So you're going to do that on this side and get those glued down. You're going to do it on this side and get this glued down. So I've already done it here, and you can see how this side is all glued down. Okay, so everything's tight there. It's not going anywhere. You're going to weave the whole thing. Once you get done weaving the whole thing, you're going to flip it over. Then what I want you to do is you're going to do glue back here, and you're going to take all these little flappy edges that you have, you're going to flip them over and glue it down. So all of this gets glued down, all of this gets glued down. You don't have any up here, okay? So when you get finished, you should have something that looks similar to this, okay? This is your surface that you're going to be printing on, okay? All right, so now let's quickly go to the printing part. And this part is not hard at all. All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to, I'm going to put this down because this can get kind of messy. You're going to get your plates. Make sure that you have your mat nearby and that it's ready to roll. Also, you might want to let that dry in between because tissue paper is very fine and so it will tear apart. All right, now, printing. You've got your makeshift printing plate. I'm going to pull this off and put it over here. All right. Whenever you ink up your brayer, you are going to barely kind of put it in the ink, and then you're going to roll. And then you're going to roll back a different direction, go back again, then you can get a tad bit more ink. And I don't know if you can hear that, but it should sound kind of tacky and sticky. If it doesn't, that means that you have too much, and what'll happen is when you go to do this, it's going to seep down into all those places you don't want it to be. So you want it to sound tacky like that. So if it's not sounding tacky, just sit here and go like this for a while until it starts to sound tacky, and then you're ready to go. All right? Okay, so I'm going to take my first plate, and I'm going to show you this one first because this one was done very, very well. And I'm going to roll forward. Now notice when I get the black ink on there, you can really see what areas are pushed down and what areas are still, you know, regular surface area. And then I want you to roll back from side to side as well. And then because the edges don't like to print very well, I want you to take your wrist and just kind of tilt your brayer a little bit and just hit those edges just a little bitty bit like that. All right. Now you're going to pick up your plate very carefully, and you're going to situate it on your mat. Lay it down, and you're going to want to press, press, press really, really, really good. Try not to let it wiggle around, and you want to just press, press, press real good. Now sometimes as I keep going, this will kind of start to get messy, and I will get ink all back here. And so if you need to, you can get a paper towel and lay it down on top while you're pressing it. And so I'm going to pull this off, and you can see what it looks like. Okay, so you can see on the areas that are white on here, that's where you've got these negative spaces. Okay, the places where the ink is, that's your positive place. That's what prints. Okay, so I'm done with that one. I'm going to put it to the side. I'm going to grab my next one. I'm sticky. I'm good to go there. I'm going to go ahead and roll it. And you can usually kind of see once you get the ink on there, you can see how well you've done in pressing it down. And like I said, I grabbed a couple of students. So in this one, on this design, these places right in here were supposed to be pushed down. They didn't do such a hot job of pushing them down, but that's okay because it's still going to have a very interesting effect to it. I'm going to press that all down. And while I finish up doing this, let's go to the quote of today. Are you really sure that a floor can't also be a ceiling? M.C. Escher. All right, so I'm just about to pull my third one off. And it looks like that. And then my last one, and this is the one I'm not too sure how it's going to print, so it'll be good for us to see. Yeah, it won't be too bad. Make sure you get those edges. And also, when you first lay your first plate on there, it's not quite that big of a deal. But when you go to lay your third and your fourth plate on there, you want to make sure that you get everything lined up as well as you can. And sometimes your plates may not be exactly the same size, so kind of keep that in mind and do the best that you can to kind of arrange things to where it looks as neat as you can. All right, so I think we are done. Let's see. All right, pretty good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps us up for today. This is your 4-part print. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now go out and make some amazing art.